We've got an exciting topic today for Harbor Time, something that impacts everybody at some point in their life, I'm sure. And thank you for joining. Don't forget to like, subscribe, or even share the podcast with someone. I appreciate your comments, and let's just get right into it. Today, we're going to talk about navigating the job market as an experienced professional. And we're going to talk about it in the context of adversity, dealing with adversity. So the first segment that we're going to cover is dealing with adversity. We're going to talk about job hunting as a seasoned professional. And we are going to give a few examples of companies that are using artificial intelligence to address adversity. We're also going to have a little fun section. On Harbor Time, we like to play Who Was Better so that we can get to know our guests a little bit better. And I've mentioned a few times that we are going to cover these topics. So let me introduce our guest today, Dennis Gierula. Now, Dennis and I go way back. We've known each other, if I have to guess, for 10, 11, 12 years.
At least.
At least. He was a client of mine at a company that I previously worked at. He's worked for big companies like JP Morgan Chase. He's worked for Redfin. He's done a lot of things. He's a great client, by the way. We've got some funny things that have happened when I was pressing as a vendor to try to get things, and he's kind of just had to tap the brakes on me a little bit. And Dennis may not know this, but one time when he lived in California, I flew from Dallas to California just to have lunch with him. And when I got there, he came out and he said, we're really busy. We may not be able to meet for that long. Now, we disguised the visit in the context of, we're meeting with a bunch of clients while we're in the Los Angeles area. But it was really just to meet with Dennis and one of his associates. They had a lot going on, but luckily we got to meet that day. So Dennis, how's it going?
Wonderful. Can't complain. Thanks for having me on and really appreciate it. It's looks like it's a bunch of fun and interesting topics we're going to talk about, and hopefully there's some useful information I can share.
Yeah. So one of the things that I didn't have on the outline that I should have is tell us a little bit about yourself, Dennis. Give us a little bit of background.
So my background has been generally helping companies scale from small to large in a number of institutions, mostly financial services background, but really have prided myself in helping to build the culture that keeps people engaged, gives them the opportunities to grow, which helps people in turn be successful down the road. So really like helping people now, especially where I'm at in my career, coaching people along, because it's the best thing that you can do is see someone be successful. And there's a number of people that have worked with me that have gone on to bigger and better things, which is great to see that success and know that, hey, I help provide a little bit of knowledge to help them get to that point. So prior to at Redfin, helping to build out the general contractor on the iBuy and like the concierge things, a lot of default mortgage experience, mostly in the REO space, where we had worked together a lot on the insurance claims and how to maximize that money on those damaged properties coming in. So just a lot of that background.
Which is where I met you. We were maximizing money on damaged properties. And Dennis, you're in a little bit of a unique situation. Not unique really, because there are millions of people in a similar situation and millions of people who will go through this multiple times in their life, and it's dealing with adversity. And in our situation, we're experienced professionals. That's a nice way to put it, right? We're experienced professionals. So we're in this phase of life where we've got all these experiences, we've got all these things we want to share, but we also got to kind of take care of ourselves, right? And so we're going to jump right into the first issue, which is dealing with adversity. And, there are several types of adversity. Some of the things that just come to mind right now are job loss, which we're going to cover. And job loss can mean a number of things. I've actually experienced job loss from a layoff. I've also experienced job loss from the good old fashioned way of simply being fired for one reason or another. And by fired, I don't mean, hey, here's a package, you get to do this, this, and this. And this was a, hey, thanks, you tried, see you later, right? That kind of deal. Business loss. I was actually in the insurance business when the Great Recession began several years ago, and a lot of our business just dried up. So we didn't lose the business, but for all intents and purposes, we did. There's illnesses. We've seen a lot lately, weather damage that just pops up. One day you're fine, the next day your house is destroyed. We've seen, unfortunately, a lot of mass shootings, right? And things where people wake up and they go to school or they go somewhere else and these tragic things happen. So there's a lot of adversity that comes up. And I shared a little bit about some of mine. What about you? Do you have any adversity stories you'd like to share?
Well, I think the adversity stories are probably similar to what you've gone through, right? There's that job loss. Sometimes you see it coming and sometimes you don't. I think we've all had those personal losses that we've gone through, whether it's a family member passing away or something else traumatic that happened. So uh, and I'm not saying that job loss is an adversity, but there's different levels of adversity that you go through. And I think just keeping that in light is the key when you have the job loss adversity, because it isn't the end of the world. And it ultimately you're going to find something else. It's just that search to find something else that that next step in the process. I've been there, and sometimes that adversity of a job loss is really telling you I wasn't happy in that role as it was. It's just I have these other needs I need to support, like school, kids, house, and all that you get hung up with, that I just need to get this going and somehow it's going to improve. And then there's the universe telling you it's not going to get any better. And now guess what? You have to go do it. Here's your shove out into the world, right? Of trying to job search, because job search is a full-time job, as you know, from the sales standpoint and also from looking. So I think there's a lot of things with you. You just have to keep in mind that, stay positive, because as soon as you're negative, nobody's going to want to help you, or everything that can go wrong starts to go wrong, right? So it's that positivity that's important to keep, and how I found going through some of the adversity on that piece.
Yeah, I talk a lot about mindset, right? And I think that's what you're talking
Hmm.
about with the positivity, and that helps build resilience.
Hmm.
Another way to deal with adversity is to seek support from others. And what I've noticed from you, Dennis, is ever since this layoff that occurred, or this, your
Hmm.
company getting out a specific line of business and just letting a lot of people go. It was a business decision,
Hmm.
right? And all that kind of stuff. And what I've seen from you is that you are helping others, right? You're on LinkedIn. We're talking about LinkedIn. You're posting articles, or hey, you see a job, here's a job that's for my network of people that they might be interested in, or here's a few tips that I found on a job search that might be practical or helpful for somebody. So those are ways that you're coping with it. So while you're also looking
True.
for whatever that next phase of life is, you're coping with it by helping others, right?
Well, I think so, and I think with the last time with Redfin just saying that, hey, we're out. It's not in our long-term business decision, being part of 350 people that were exited. It's a little bit different, and having been through this before and trying to figure out where the resources are of how do you find help. A lot of the people that were in my group may not have been in that situation before, especially if you're um, not as long in your career where you haven't experienced some of these things. People don't know where to start. And it was very important for me, as I've gone through that, not knowing where to look, of at least passing on the start here, and help make it more of a journey than just the chaos that can go with some of that, and not knowing where to start. It's important for me to help the group, give them the resources to be successful. So it was just part of making it better and trying to help people through it, because it's an abrupt change that people weren't necessarily expecting.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in segment 2 also. But yeah, the abruptness of what leads to adversity is what catches most people off, right? So 350 people, let's say in that instance, came into work, and maybe some of them thought something was going to happen that week, right?
Mhm.
But I don't know that any of them, and by the way, I was a vendor for that company, right? We were providing services to you, and it really caught us off guard, right? So our business, while we had started to look at other markets and we had added a couple of clients, we were still heavily concentrated with that particular client as our number one client. And so all of a sudden, hey, in 3, 4, 5 months, this business is going to be gone, right? So that's another challenge. One of the ways I've talked about coping with things, you and I talked about it at lunch the other day, is the concept of just make contact,
Mhm.
right? So most people know, but a lot of times in baseball, batters, even professional baseball players, get in a slump. They can't hit the ball. They can't, no matter how hard they try, no matter how many millions of dollars they're being paid, they can't hit the ball. And so the concept there is, hey, just make contact with the ball. Just make contact. Don't try to hit a home run. Don't try to, have your best hit ever. Just make contact. And some of the ways of, that I'm translating that over into life is just making contact may mean just update your resume
Mhm.
today, right? Your way of making contact, of coping today, is updating your resume or reaching out to one person or reaching out to someone that you think you can help. And then you never know where it will lead. So do you have any other ways that you deal with adversity?
Yeah, I think the baseball analogy is very good, because if you look at baseball, it's a game of failure, right? Is the one of the greatest hitters of all time had a season where 40% of the time he was successful. If you look at the average major leaguer, and 30% of the time you're successful. You're great if you're 35% of the time successful. It's the same thing in job search. So you have to remember, to your point, it's about contact. It's about getting out there. I think the hardest thing that people have to overcome is asking for help and letting people know that, hey, this happened. It's not anyone's fault on my team that they were laid off. It's not like the group wasn't performing or we weren't hitting targets. It's a business decision, and business is business. So you kind of have to go through the process of grieving through that, right? And just get the chip off your shoulder of what happened. You're right. It's not fair, but that's life, right? So we have to get over it and move on. I think the things that help, to your point, is getting out and talking to people. Since the pandemic, I think we've become more of a virtual world, and in that virtual world, it's really easy to get stuck in that emotion and not have an outlet for that. And I know I've experienced it, and that's one of the reasons why I've been trying to get out and do more in-person stuff. So I might go to a network meeting in South Lake. There's a big group. There's a smaller group that meets on Fridays. Um, there's one in Frisco. So I try and get out and rotate. But the most important thing is it gives me contact with other people, which you build energy from that. And then the other piece that really helped me, and this isn't related to necessarily networking, but it's volunteering. Right. So every Wednesday I end up volunteering at a local it's providing meals, shelter, and that to the homeless in Denton, or people that need it, not necessarily homeless, but there's a bunch of situations. One of the things that it helps me to do is put life in perspective of what's out there. So no matter what's going on, it helps you to remember that your issues aren't necessarily the worst thing that is going on in the world, or to other people around you. So I'm not saying it's not fun, but it helps just keep things in perspective so you don't dwell on it, to your point.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. Nobody is saying your situation isn't bad,
Mhm.
right? Whatever bad is. But there's always one person one step behind you, right? There's also one person, at least one person one step ahead of you. We covered this on a different podcast that I co-host, and we had some guests once, and that's what the whole theme was, is look, you're here to help, right? You're one step ahead of somebody and you're one step behind somebody. So help out. But some of the things you said there really help us transition into segment number 2, which is job hunting as a seasoned worker. This is a challenge. I know there are people in college who are getting ready for jobs, right? And they're looking for jobs. There are people who are out of college who are looking for jobs. There are people all over the world looking for jobs. But there are some challenges, I think, with seasoned workers, whatever you consider a seasoned worker. I think you and I both definitely fall into that category. And there are challenges faced in the job market. One of them, and we'll talk about some of those, one of these may be technology gaps. There's artificial intelligence is such a big part of it now, and we'll talk about that. Job titles. I mean, hey, you've worked your whole career. Shouldn't you be a senior vice president or an executive vice president of something? Pay assumptions. You've built a life. There's children in college. You're getting closer to retirement. So there are pay assumptions. You've worked your whole life. Shouldn't you be making $500,000 a year? Right. Gary Vaynerchuk, who I listen to quite a bit, podcasting and watching, he is very sincere and very adamant about, look, if you can find a job making $60,000 a year that you control your life and that you're happy with, then that is better than $175,000 per year that you're miserable with. Now, there are some things you have to pay for, right? Houses, cars, college for kids, etc. But let's talk about some of that. Let's talk about technology gaps, how you're facing this as a seasoned worker. Maybe some tips and resources for seasoned workers.
Yeah, and I think the point is that if it hasn't happened to you yet, chances are it's going to. So just be prepared, and that's one of the reasons of networking, because if you start building those relationships before you need it, it doesn't feel like you're a taker when it comes to reaching out to people afterwards, right? When it happens. So it's about being engaged all the way through. I think the biggest thing that are out there is through a lot of the networking groups that are out there, like in Dallas, it's a very unique city in that there's a lot of groups that are out here to help. It's not like that in Los Angeles. It's not like that in Detroit, in some of the areas where I've lived. But the nice thing is now with the virtual world is help get people in other parts of the country connected to get the help that they need. So there's some virtual options that have been good in the virtual world. I think that's been the biggest thing is through there, you can actually, if you're collecting unemployment through the Texas Workforce Commission, you can actually get free training to do program project management, PMP certificates, some of that stuff through some of the training groups that are out there. It doesn't cost you anything. The state of Texas pays for it all. If you don't want to go to necessarily class to address some of those skill sets issues, there's Work in Texas has it's where you can build your skills, and you can do that virtually. So I'm taking some classes on green belt in project management, so I can do that virtually and working through that. So I think there's ways to build skills. You just have to keep doing it. LinkedIn is a great source. You don't necessarily have to be a premium member to take advantage of the LinkedIn learning. Just get a library card. Most of the libraries, like Louisville Library here in Texas, you can, as part of being a library member for free, you can access and do all those courses online as well. So I think there's a lot of things that are out there that are easy to do, and in a virtual world have gotten much easier to do. I think that's the advantage that we've had of going through the last couple of years.
Yeah, and we talk about job hunting as a seasoned worker. This could also apply to client hunting as a solopreneur.
Mm-hmm.
Work hunting, work meaning, maybe not a employment, but a client as a seasoned solopreneur. A lot of these things apply. Now, the Work in Texas stuff doesn't necessarily apply to solopreneurs, but there are resources available for solopreneurs. And to me, the main resource, quite frankly, is LinkedIn and Twitter.
Mhm.
Find solopreneurs, find people who are doing it, find people who are successful, making from 50K to $5 million per year as a solopreneur, and read what they're saying. Follow steps. They provide content telling you exact or suggesting exactly what to do. Now, you may
It,
say that's silly, or there's no way this person makes that much money, or there's no way that I can do it, but you can. And I know that there are potential technology gaps, but I've figured all this stuff out the last couple of years.
But it's a mindset. What you're really talking about is a mindset, right? And there are a ton of resources that are out there. People just don't network enough. There's all kinds of networking groups for individual type of solopreneurs that are in something that, no matter what you're selling, right? Um, there's groups that are out there. You have to network to find that. There are a lot of free resources here to take advantage of. And I will say this is one of the things that we have in common, you being a solopreneur, always looking for that next gig. We're both in sales and marketing, right? Because my job is to sell myself for that next position and market what I can bring to a company and help, just like what you bring to the skills of helping someone expand their business in monitoring, say, like what we used to work with, monitoring insurance claims for REOs. I mean, you did a really good job with that, right? But you had to get the word out, and you had to have people there that you could count on to help. But it's all sales and marketing of getting the word out of what you can do and what you're good at.
Yeah, no doubt. Thank you. That is very wise and very true. So let's talk about two letters real fast. AI. Artificial intelligence, because while artificial intelligence has been around for a while, it really hit the scene late last year, right? And it is really on the scene now. And initially, I think I wanted to cover dealing with adversity and how artificial intelligence could help deal with adversity. And you provided some comments on the outline, and I agree with you, because I've written an article and am posting in an app called Swell, which is short podcast, if you will, about how artificial intelligence can't replace gut decisions, right? And it's the same thing. Artificial intelligence, it's tough for that to maybe help you deal with adversity, right? There are human things that need to be done, things to you that need to be said, experiences that need to be felt to help deal with adversity. But when we talk about AI, which is going to be here to stay, regardless of whether or not people have chosen to embrace it, let's talk about it in the context again of, I'll talk about it as a solopreneur in a minute, but how about in the job search? Are you finding, are you using AI? Are you allowing it to help you with whatever you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, yeah, and I think it is helpful. It's not the be all end all. And one of the things where this ties into is this will help people with some of their technology gaps. If you're able to talk about what is the latest technology, AI, and you can use it and come up with prompts, there's a lot of positive side, especially if you're in marketing where you're seeing a lot of that stuff being used to create content. I think in general, AI is great as long as we as humans become creative, since it learns from us and what's out there. So we have to be creative for it to continue to create. I'm not sure what advances are out there, but I'm not sure that hell from 2001 Space Odyssey is where we're headed with that either. But enough of that piece. But what I do use it for is I think it's a great way to come up and quickly help with taking a look at job descriptions and your resume to see what skills are a match and what you want to make sure that you highlight on. I think there's a lot of positives to that. I think it can help you come up with an outline for a cover letter to help support certain things that are out there. I think it's good to help build a 30, 60, 90-day plan if you want to show that, hey, this is what I would do based on this job description. Now, I say they're outlines because when I use AI, I take a look at okay, here's the outline of it, but it's not in how I would speak. So I can't necessarily just pop that together and put it out there, because it's not going to sound like me. It's going to sound like, well, I've never heard him talk like that or seen him write like that, right? And you get a lot of sentences that are similar in lengths and stuff that you look at. So I always take and then create it myself. And in order to look like that I know actually, how to, spell and grammar and all that good stuff, I'll run it through Grammarly on top of that, right, to
Mhm.
make sure that it's readable, and it's out there. So I think there's a lot of positives to that, and it'll help shorten time. You can use it as a research assistant. So if you wanted to go in, and I just used this on an interview a couple of days ago of preparing for it, is saying, hey, act as a research assistant and tell me about X, X, and X about this company, put it in bullet point format. You can do a SWOT analysis on this stuff. There's all kinds of stuff you can do with it that will save time so you can become more effective and do more in your job search. And it allows you then to make more personal contact, which is what technology should help us to do.
Absolutely. And very similarly, you can use it as a solopreneur for a lot of the same things. I don't think people realize how they can use, let's say, Chat GPT. One of the other things when you talked about putting it through Grammarly to make sure, I'll tell you what I've done. I've got a blog, and I've gone to Chat GPT and I said, hey, write me an article, a blog post about Dennis Gierula. I'm just making it up, right? And it writes a very good blog post for me. I copy it, I paste it into Word, I click the red line box or the red line box, and so we've got about 10 minutes, but we're good. We're good. I take the red line box and I go through and I start changing it. Yeah, I don't like this subject. I don't like this topic. I don't like the way this is worded, and I change it. And essentially, I'm using it as an outline. I then put it through Grammarly. In most cases, sometimes I forget to do it, but I put it through Grammarly. But then you can also do the check for plagiarism.
Absolutely.
So you can not only check your grammar, then put it in the plagiarism checker. See if AI is cheating a little bit. See if AI is stealing exact sentences from others. Guess what? I've done that 20 times. One sentence has found to be plagiarized and with that. So it's interesting.
I forgot to mention that, but you do need to run it through the plagiarism. I do that, and I'll get hits about 3 to 4% of the time that there's something in there. So I go in and change it. But a lot of the stuff gets changed anyways when I'm going through it. But I do think that is the downside of it. And if you are using it for cover letters, and you've got 100 people applying, and people are using Chat GPT, you run into the risk of having the same cover letter as everyone else out there. So without putting your personal touch into it, you have just effectively said, well, this is just another person, and this doesn't look right. And I've heard stories about that coming up. In fact, in one of the groups, about someone applying for a board spot. There was people over in different parts of the country. I think there was 3 or 4 people that had very similar cover letters that went through probably a chat a GPT process. And the question is, well, how do you stand out? Because now it looks like you're all just using the same source to come up with something. You're not an individual. So I think that's a real piece that you have to watch out for.
No doubt. So we've got a few minutes left here, and we're going to jump into our bonus segment, which is Who Was Better? This is a segment where we take a couple of bands or musicians and we throw them out there and we find out who the guest thinks is better. Now, in the past, we've had people come up with draws. Billy Joel versus Elton John was a draw. The Flock of Seagulls versus Madness. Madness won that one. But today we're going punk, baby. We are going Ramones, which according to Wikipedia is the first true punk band, or Iggy Pop, which also is known as the godfather of punk. Dennis, who was better?
Well, before we go into whose was better, you could actually make the case that Johnny Cash was the first punk dude, based on his lyrics and what he wrote about and how he
Okay.
did that. So just saying,
I'm
I
just telling you what
will.
Wikipedia said. I
Oh
cited
no,
my
I
source.
hear you. I hear you, and I wiki the same thing, and that's where I saw where that came from. But I thought that was an interesting fact when I was doing it, is saying people have made the case that there. So interesting. I will tell you who is better. Well, I have to go with the hometown guy, so that would be Iggy.
Okay.
Just because that's who was there, and I think just the what he has done and kind of moving things forward and being true to what he's done all those years is there. I like the Ramones. I think they move things forward to saying that, hey, you can have 2-minute songs that are meaningful,
Mhm.
um, that are out there. But I enjoy a good Iggy, um, an Iggy song.
Well, whenever you're classified as the godfather of something, then that means you're at least top two, right? I
Mhm.
mean, that means a lot. I'll tell you, back when my high school daughter still let me drive her to school before she turned 16, one time we were driving and I played some Ramones for her, and she was like, "Who is that?" I didn't tell her who it was. We're playing some songs. She's like, "Who is that?" I was like, "Yeah, exactly. Exactly." I mean, all of that stuff is so good. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Iggy Pop is better. That's not to say the Ramones are bad, because the Ramones are not bad. They're great. They are greatness too. So today we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. We've talked about some challenges facing adversity, and then looked at it in a specific context. Though, like I mentioned, there are a lot of adverse adversity situations that you will be in life, and how you can use them. But we talked about it in the context of being a seasoned professional looking for a job, or being a seasoned professional as a solopreneur looking for your next gig or your next client. I think it's important to remember that there's tools out there available, but I like what Dennis said earlier too, which is, hey, sometimes you got to give back. You got to give back, whether it's volunteering, whether it's posting things, whether it's going to a networking group that's not all about you, it's about the others too, and how you can help them. I know Dennis introduced me to somebody from one of his groups a couple of months ago, and we had a call. It was a gentleman who was seasoned, who was looking maybe towards more of a solopreneur type of a lifestyle at this stage in his life. So, it was great to talk about it. Do you want to say anything in conclusion, Dennis?
Yeah, I think a couple of things is to what you had said, just real quick, is find a network, get out there and help. You've got to be with people that understand the situations. A lot of the network groups, you're going to find you're not the only one in a situation, no matter how much experience that you have. The other thing that I really think is, as a seasoned person, you have to look at the size of the company that you're looking at. You're probably not going to find a senior executive role popping into like a Chase, because they're going to bring people up. And really, where your skills may be best suited are smaller to mid-sized companies. So make sure you have a good target list of who you're looking for, that are out there, because things are different now than before. And the last thing that I can say is be open to informational interviews. Help pass on your experience in ways to help with other people. It's so hard. I know a lot of people are out there that are looking for it, but it's the best way to help someone. That's the best way to help someone really get their job search going, and providing some leads of people they should talk to. So appreciate this, Collin. Thanks so much. It was fun talking to you. I always learn something new when I listen to one of the Harbor Time podcasts or any of the number of things that you're doing. It's always interesting.
Well, thank you, Dennis. And what you mentioned a minute ago, as a seasoned professional, is to do informational interviews, right, to help others in that context. But quite frankly, everybody should do that, because you never know what you're going to learn. You never know how you may be able to help somebody. You never know how your experiences can impact somebody else. And to me, that's what it's all about. So I want to encourage anybody listening or watching this to share a story. You can post it in the comments, or if you don't want to post it in the comments, go share your story with somebody else today. Go find somebody that you can impact and help overcome adversity, particularly someone who may be struggling with something that you know about. But keep in mind too, there's always people struggling with things that you don't know about, right? people don't always share what they're struggling with. They don't always share their adversity and how to deal with it and what they're dealing with. So thank you very much. Thank you for listening to Harbor Time. We will be back very soon. Please like, subscribe, share the podcast, share information, leave any comments, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, listeners.
Thanks, Collin.